10.
Chris, the topic your die roll has determined we'll discuss is pick one from the table of our choice. So, Chris, you get to look at the table of topics and choose the topic we'll be discussing.
This is good. Let's talk about topic number 8. How do you bring a new game to your existing game group? This was added by Murph back in episode 15.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running games. My name is Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
And this is, Andy, this is sort of our 1 year anniversary of starting the podcast. I haven't gone back in my email and looked quite yet, but I think it was about January, kind of end of December, when you sent me that first fateful email saying, hey, should we do a podcast?
Is that how this all started? It's just a big blur.
Yeah, I'm going to blame you for it, so it's all on you. But yeah, so we've been doing this for a year, which is kind of crazy, because I think when we started, both of us were just like, well, let's sort of see what happens. And I don't think either of us had expectations that it was going to make it much longer than maybe an episode or two, but yeah. I'm glad to see that we're here.
What a long and winding road it's been, Chris.
Yeah, I was remarking to someone that the kind of my least expected outcome from doing this was that we would end up meeting so many cool and interesting people.
Yes.
And just getting to interact with them and hang out and talk about gaming and stuff. And I know we've made kind of real life friends from it too, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way. I've been reflecting a little bit myself on this, and yeah, I would never have guessed that the number one cool thing that has happened to me personally because of this podcast is I now know a bunch of really smart, really interesting, really great people that I didn't before. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're all much better GMs than us too, so it's nice to have those resources at hand when we have questions.
So listeners, if you're struggling, if you want to meet new people, just start up a podcast. It's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, this is the introvert's nightmare, is you have to start a whole thing to meet people. But but it's been really good, and I think we are sticking around definitely for 2020 just to see sort of where it goes from here. I did want to talk a little bit about our goals. We're not going to belabor this too much, but just want to set sort of the stage for the next year. I think we're planning on getting back to our normal schedule of rolling topics and discussing them. But if you are a listener, you probably saw that the past couple episodes have been sort of these special episodes where we built a dungeon and then played the dungeon too. That was a lot of fun for us, I think. And so what we're looking for is if anyone has any feedback on if you want to hear more of that, or if that was just awful and you'd rather us just to kind of stick to the basics, let us know that too. We're always happy to hear feedback on if that was effective for you, if you liked it at all. So
and I think our plan is to pretty much stick to the basics, the core purpose of our show. But Chris and I do a lot of discussing about what are some ways we can expand the scope of the show a little bit in some interesting ways. So if you think that you would like to see more either live on the air dungeon creation or live on the air dungeon exploring, let us know. And if you think that is not what you want us to be doing with our time, again, let us know. I will say, Chris, the timing couldn't have been better, because the episode we recorded right before we did the whole online dungeon creation and online GMing thing was the how do you deal with anxiety as a game master? And let me just tell you, there was plenty of game master anxiety on my part as I anticipated running that game. So I don't know if the episode helped, but it at least felt appropriate. And so,
That's really great. Because was that the first time you've ever done something online?
It is not, but it was certainly a unique thing. I was playing with people that I either didn't know at all or had only met through the podcast and have never met face to face. So that is new. That is new for me. So not quite running for strangers, but running for people with whom I don't have an existing, kind of rapport, and I don't know their personalities and stuff real well. So it induced a little anxiety, but not unhealthily. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've run a handful of sessions of stuff online, and you don't realize how much you value being in person with people and kind
Yes.
of seeing their different their facial expressions, and even just sort of like hearing the weird noises and stuff they make, just to help the conversation
Yep.
along. Because a lot of times when you're running online, everybody's mics sort of duck out automatically.
Yes.
So if they're not saying anything, everybody just looks like they're staring at you, like
Yes.
waiting for you to do sort of the next thing.
Oh my goodness, yes,
So-
that was certainly the case here, and maybe we can go into more depth in this if a topic related to it comes up. But on that topic, there is just enough time, there's just enough lag between when you stop saying something and somebody else starts responding to you. There's just enough time for me to think, uh-oh, silence, I'd better fill this with some words and start babbling. So it's clearly a skill you need to learn to do well. So
Yeah, that's probably a good topic that we should throw in and bring someone who knows what they're talking about on to to kind of give us the basics on how to effectively run a game like that. But,
yes.
Yeah, so I think so looking into the future, right? So yeah, we're gonna get back to sort of our normally scheduled stuff, right? I think part of that is guests, right? So we want to get some new guests on in the coming year. So if you know anyone who should be on the podcast, do please reach out. We're particularly interested in, we're white guys who run D&D. That's great. However, there are a lot of different sorts of people and a lot of different sorts of games out there. And so we'd like to get kind of a broader, more diverse group of people on the podcast and talk about just some different stuff and get some different perspectives on it. Because goodness knows I have a ton of blind spots. So it's always nice to have other perspectives on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's going to be kind of a big focus, I think, of what we're doing. Two, just on the back end, just to make this podcast kind of as interesting as possible. Because otherwise I think we'll just sort of fall into a rut where we're talking about the same sorts of combat scenarios over and over.
Yes. If we're still talking about dungeon doors in a year, you can email us and tell us to stop it.
Yes. Yeah.
So hey, Chris, before we dive into our topic, can we just do a real brief holiday recap? I have two quick questions for you. A, did you get any role-playing games for Christmas? Did you get them for yourself, or did somebody gift them to you?
I actually did not this year.
Okay.
I have a pretty big backlog. Nope, that's a lie. You sent me a link to a Humble Bundle of a bunch of Lord of the Rings stuff, so of course I bought that. So that's a total lie. Yeah, I picked up about 10 books of Lord of the Rings related. 5th edition.
So you didn't buy a game, you bought a whole game line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about to tell you about the shame of my backlog, and I just added to it. So.
Yes.
Yeah, what about you? Did you pick up anything or get anything?
I didn't get any role-playing games for Christmas. I did get the Dune board game, which is recently reprinted, which I'm excited about. So here's the thing. Maybe our listeners can help me out. So I got a $20 gift card for the local game store. So if somebody has an idea of what's the biggest bang for my $20 I can get in the RPG aisle of the local game store, please write or tweet and tell us.
Yeah, that's a good question. My initial reaction to that is you should go buy a $20 metal D20. I think you'd be pretty happy with that over the long term.
I'll put it on the list of possibilities, Chris. Maybe I'll make a list of all the suggestions people make and then roll to see what I end up buying.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah.
Okay.
See what Andy's going to buy.
I'm going to do that, but to do that, I need more than just Chris's suggestion. So please let us know what I should spend my $20 on.
Yeah.
So, Chris, my other quick holiday-related question is, do you personally, aside from this podcast, have any game-related resolutions for 2020?
Yeah, I am going to. We were discussing just with some of the previous guests. We're gonna do a Blades in the Dark game or two. So that's sort of on my list. I also, I don't really have any grand plans other than sort of continuing the game as much as I can. I don't have anything that I'm like, yes, this is the year I'm going to be running this campaign or that campaign. But yeah, I want to try. I think my resolution, if I had to say anything, would be try out a couple different systems. Try out some different styles of play, just with some different folks too. What about you? Do you have any gaming related resolutions?
Something similar. I have a number of games I would either like to try or be exposed to, and that I hope happens in 2020. But I'm not. Things on that list are Band of Blades.
Ooh,
Because of this podcast, I'd really like to run a a campaign of GURPS. I mean, there's a few kind of random things I've got on my list, but I think the one resolution that I'm really hoping pans out is I would like to get a sustained campaign of D&D going for my 12-year-old daughter and her friends. So
that's great.
I have run games for them in the last year or two, pretty successfully, I think. But on actually New Year's Day, we got all 4 of them together in the same room with new level 1 characters, and it's my hope that this turns into a campaign that goes through 2020. We'll see how it goes.
That's super great. So they had fun?
They seemed to have a great time. Yeah. I was pretty pleased with how it went. I have a secret goal of running this campaign long enough to get it rolling, and then seeing if one of them wants to take over and GM for their friends. Basically, take me out of the picture.
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens, but I'd be happy just. I don't know. I had a lot of fun game mastering it. Kids that age are just so creative and funny.
And murderous.
Yeah. And murderous. They're very murderous.
Yeah.
You hear these stories of like murderous D&D campaigns where people are always trying to kill every NPC they meet. That's 12-year-old girls. I experienced that on that game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't have to kill this person. He could maybe be of use to you if you let him live long enough to give you a quest. Just a thought.
He could be your friend. Yeah. So this actually dovetails into our topic pretty well then. So had all of these kids played D&D before, or were you introducing any of them to it for the first time?
They have all had some kind of exposure to D&D. Like my daughter has played some D&D, and at least one of the other kids has played, and the other 2 had, until I started running some games for them, had siblings who played D&D, and they were interested by it, but had not been allowed to play it by their older siblings.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah. So pretty new, but very interested in the premise before they got to the table. So I did not have to do a lot of lengthy introduction of like, here is what a role-playing game is, and here's what Dungeons and Dragons is all about. They all kind of got it just from the general zeitgeist, or from playing it, or from overhearing siblings playing it.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Yeah, so with other game groups you've had then, have you had this experience of trying to pivot or to drop a new game on them?
I have, yes. This is actually something that should be a different topic out of this, and that is I have a problem as a game master of chasing the shiny new game. And so an impulse I have to fight constantly is I have to really fight against getting bored with whatever I'm running right now and getting the group to shift to a new game.
Yeah.
I am okay shifting to new games constantly, but most other people are not. And the more casual, I think, in my experience, the more casual of a player you are, the less likely you are to want to just hop from game system to game system just to try out new mechanics or to explore new setting ideas. So that's not exactly an answer to the question you asked. But yes, I have run games where we have switched game systems many times over the years. And sometimes it's been successful, and sometimes, usually when it was the result of me getting bored and chasing the shiny new system that I got for my birthday or whatever like that, those tend to be less successful. To be a little more concrete, so last year I ran an off and on game of D&D with my group, and that group, over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years, we started out running Pathfinder, and we transitioned to D&D, keeping the characters and the setting, but just changing rule systems. So I shepherded us through that transition. And then after maybe a year or 2 into running that, we decided to change to the One Ring, so a total change of campaign. And now we have been discussing actually reverting at some point this year back to D&D. Mostly because we anticipate inviting another person or 2 into the group, and we are thinking that maybe D&D is a better on-ramp. So yeah.
Was this a continual campaign then? So even when you switched to the One Ring, was it the same campaign, or did you start over?
When we moved from Pathfinder to 5th edition D&D, we kept the campaign and the characters. So I rebuilt the characters in 5th edition. Honestly, the 2 systems share so many basic assumptions about how gameplay works that was pretty seamless.
Mm-hmm.
However, switching to the One Ring is a really idiosyncratic game with a very specific setting, and there is no way to really plausibly transition the D&D characters into the One Ring setting. So they rolled up new One Ring specific characters that they've been using for that.
That's really interesting. So you just mentioned a little bit ago that like casual players and some players just don't want to transition to a new system. Did you find with these players that they were like happy to do that, or were you really kind of dragging them along?
They were pretty fine with it. This group of players doesn't pay too much attention to the mechanics. I honestly don't know how much they really noticed as a tangible difference when we went from Pathfinder to 5th edition. I mean, obviously they noticed, but that was a really smooth transition and no one objected. If I were to say, hey guys, I want to shift us to start using GURPS or something that would require a real change of gameplay mentality, then yeah, I would expect and totally understand them to say, hey, wait, I'm happy with D&D. Let's not change.
Yeah. This is again kind of a tangential thing, but I've been thinking more recently about getting away from doing long-term campaigns and instead going to shorter ones. So not necessarily just doing one-shots over and over, but aiming for like a 3 to 4 session arc for everything.
Yeah.
The thought being that then it allows you to sort of get away a little bit from a couple of problems, which are, it's like one is just scheduling, right? It's like, if you're going to commit to a game, do you really want to commit to like 3 years of playing sort of the same game? And then also I think for the most GMs really sort of feel that need of like, well, I want to try sort of a new system all the time, right? Like they kind of don't want to just run D&D forever. At least myself, I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, but yeah, it's something that I've noticed is a lot of GMs, they're also the sort of people that end up explaining the rules for board games. And if you're the sort of person that likes explaining the rules for board games, you like sort of just learning rule sets. And so it's like this weird like personality quirk, I think, of the sort of person who's really good at GMing or interested in GMing also is really interested in like trying just different stuff all the time, which isn't necessarily conducive for a group of friends who just want to hang out and play a game, on a kind of a fixed basis, right? Because then you're just like, well, you're asking them to also learn kind of a big textbook too.
Yep. I first became kind of aware of that GMing tendency to want to switch systems regularly when I played for several years in a campaign with a GM who did that, and I realized how it does, despite wanting to check out new systems, it was a little tiresome to every 3 or 4 months to get an email that's like, hey guys, I'm having fun, but did you see this new system is out and it will do exactly what we've always wanted our current system to do. And then we go through the effort of changing that, and then 4 months later something else new comes out or a new edition of something comes out, and it's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So how about you? I know you have you run a lot of D&D, but you've run things like Blades in the Dark and some other quirkier stuff even. Has that ever been something you've had to sell to an existing group?
Yeah, well, somewhat. I think with Blades in particular, that campaign that I ran, so that was like 6-ish sessions. I don't know, I should look back and see. 6-ish sessions for the story that we told. That was pretty easy because it was people that I played with before, and I was able to pitch Blades as like, hey, this is the style of game that it is, and then we'll get into kind of the mechanics later. But I think the pitch for that is not the mechanics first, right? So whenever you're trying to introduce something or get someone sold on a game, you don't tell them like, this game's great, you roll D6s, right? Like, it's like, this game is great because you get to do this, that, or the other thing. Right, you're never really focused on the mechanics, I think, if you're trying to sell a system to someone, unless you're pitching it to a bunch of game masters, right? Like, if you tell them that it's going to solve some problem that they're particularly having, like, you won't have to roll another die ever again in your life. It's like, okay, well, great, like, this is perfect, I want this. But then, like, for the players, right, like, they might want to roll, but like, they might really, what they want to do is they want to pretend to be a thief, or a scoundrel. Something like that. Right. So I think like when I'm pitching stuff to people, I always try to focus on sort of like the story hook to them. And I recently had this experience actually on New Year's Eve. We were together with some friends and we were trying to figure out, what game to play. And we just finished up playing kind of an icebreakery game, I would say. The sort of game that like most GMs are like, ugh, why would we play this when we could play Dungeons and Dragons instead?
Yes.
Like a casual game, right? Which was really fun. But then so we kind of finished that up and was like, well, what do we want to play next? And so I had to pitch sort of the games that I had brought along with me. One was Kill Dr. Lucky, which is a really good game. Sort of like, it's like reverse Clue. The other one is The Quiet Year, which is also a really good game. It's like collaborative map making game. If you say collaborative map making game to a certain kind of person, let me tell you what, that's not a good pitch. If you say it's like Clue but it's reversed, that's a really good pitch. To people, right? So it was an uphill battle. Even though I really wanted to play The Quiet Year, I knew everybody would have fun. It's like, no, they're gonna play Clue, right? Like you wander around a mansion, you're trying to kill like an old guy. And then once people are sort of excited about the hook of the idea, then it's sort of like, then the mechanics, I think, can flow from there. You might not get them to play it ever again, but like that's sort of your starting point.
Now, you mentioned that when you pitch stuff, you don't talk about the mechanics. You envision and communicate the setting and the types of stories and characters that we'll be playing. So have you been in a situation like this? And if not, how might you handle this? You're happily running a game of D&D, but then you decide you want to shift to something significantly out of genre. You want to change and run a game of, I don't know, something different. Are you likely to put in a lot of work? Would you rather stick with like the current mechanics that everybody has mastered over the past year or two and knows really well and shoehorn those into a new setting? Or are you more likely to go out and look for a game that perfectly does the new setting you want to do?
I'm more likely to go out and find the game that's written for the new setting, probably to my detriment, right? Because I think once you're in the thick of it and actually running a game, sometimes you're reaching for rules that you don't know if they're there or not, which can slow things down at the table quite a bit, or sort of not let you do what you wanted to do. But if I'm going to switch genres, I tend to, rather than coming to an existing group and saying like, all right, we're all going to switch to this, what I tend to do is either stop what we're currently doing or otherwise finish it up, and then it's a like, hey, if you're interested, this is sort of the next thing that we're playing. So like you get first dibs because you're the current players in this group. If you want to step out, this is a great time to do it. Like if you want to continue on, great. Like you're sort of the core, and then we'll find other players.
So you're sort of imagining that people have not signed on to be in your gaming group.
No,
they have signed on to play in your D&D campaign, and so when it's time to switch to a Exalted campaign, you take new signups for your Exalted campaign, maybe giving preference to your existing players.
Yeah, and and for me at least, like I would never treat a gaming group as sort of like so possessive that I wouldn't allow them to like decide to nope out if they're not interested in the genre, right? Like because to me it's sort of the total experience. It's like you were signing up to come hang out with these people to run a game that or to play a game that I'm going to run for you, and it's D&D. And if any of those things change, then I think that's a great point at which to say like, if this is not for you, it doesn't have to be for you. You can go find another game. It doesn't mean like we're going to stop hanging out or you'll never get to play any other game or anything like that. But like there's no reason to just stick around. If you are not interested in running in playing in a Blades in the Dark game, I'm not going to make you play it just because I'm enamored with the resolution mechanic, which I am.
That's interesting to hear you articulate that, because that's really different than the way I spent my first decade or two in role playing.
Yeah.
When I first started playing with my friends in junior high and high school, it was very much like we're a gaming group. The 4 or 5 of us here are a gaming group, and we're gonna find a role playing game to play. Like it wasn't like, hey guys, I'd like to run some D&D. Do you want to play in my D&D campaign for 6 months? It was like, hey, we all love role playing as a thing. Let's all get together and then let's figure out which one of these games to play. And so we alternated a lot between 3 or 4 different role playing systems, depending on just what moods we were in and who was more passionate about it and things like that. As an adult, it's my experience is certainly much more like what you just described. I'm not asking people to be my best gaming RPG buds forever, no matter what we end up playing. It's something more specific.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also probably just life circumstances, right? Like, I mean, it's a big commitment for me to have something going on, like, whenever, right? So I would always want to extend that sort of to other people. It's like, yeah, like, if you don't want to play, like, you don't have to play. This is kind of interesting to think about, because I ran I called it a one-shot for another group of friends recently, and they all seem to have a lot of fun, so we scheduled another session. And I have no idea if we'll just kind of continue to keep scheduling sessions like that. Like, they all seem to be having fun, but it's also like I'm taking a little bit of a hands-off approach from it too, where I'm not like saying like, okay, great, like now here's the big grand adventure, we're going to do this for the next 3 years of our life sort of thing. It feels a lot more like I'm scheduling like board game nights at my house, right, which has a very different feel.
Yep.
And right, like, and I think that's maybe even a healthier way of running role-playing games, honestly, is taking a little bit of the pressure off of like, oh, like, we have to hit this specific schedule, right? We can just kind of play D&D as much as we want, and then when we stop, we're done. Yeah, well, we need to wrap it up a little bit. I unfortunately need to get going soon, but so I guess any sort of like partying shots, Andy. I guess, like, do you have a grand tip that you can offer people for when you're trying to intro a new game?
I think, well, my tip is going to be based on sort of the problems that the very personal issues that I referenced earlier in this episode, and that is whatever you're thinking of running, pick something that you plan to commit to the end, because this is something I still struggle to do. Pick something you're going to commit to, and then that you're gonna be enthusiastic about to the end of the campaign. So just ask yourself honestly, and then if that works well, then you have exactly the ideal scenario that you described, where you all have fun running a game for 6 months or whatever time period you initially pitched, and then at the end of that, you can all sit down and discuss: is there something more interesting that we'd like to switch to, or do we want to keep doing this? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's not much advice. Just think carefully before you pitch games, and and commit to it.
Yeah, I think that's good, because it is a commitment, and changing gears too often, I think, just like, unless that's the purpose of sort of the group that you're with, is to always be trying new stuff. Like, that way lies madness for most folks.
Madness, but I think you were the one who mentioned to me, someone on the show mentioned that they were part of a group that did a different game like every month or every. Yeah. It's like that's a very exciting sort of scenario, but very different, I think, than your typical D&D group. But.
Yeah, I think that's John Corey's group. I think Jess plays in that as well. They tend to do that, which is it's refreshing, right? Like, it's very much the purpose of that group is to try a bunch of different things.
Yeah, that was the buy-in at the very beginning. It wasn't that the GM just keeps getting new games. No.
I'm okay with compartmentalizing my life, right? Like, so there's certain friends that want to do stuff in a certain way, and that's fine. And like, I can go to a different set of friends, and they're going to be interested in different things, right? So that's a really great way of kind of maybe approaching it too. Is like, maybe you have a core group that you never touch. We're doing D&D, we're doing all the adventure modules, but then there's another group that you play with that's like, we're going to do all the wacky, independent stuff that's like just kind of playing with mechanics, or like the one-page RPGs, those sorts of things.
Yeah, the collaborative map making game.
Yes, yes, which is amazing, and everybody needs to play it. But also, I need a much better line for that.
Work on that pitch and come back to us, Chris.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we should wrap it up here. I don't think we're going to pick a new topic, because Andy and I need to talk a little bit about exactly what we're going to do with the table. There's a chance we might wipe it. There's a chance we might just kind of remove some old topics and add them in. But as always, if you have a topic, feel free to send it in, and we will take it under consideration, and we won't laugh at you or anything. But, so Andy, thank you for talking today. But I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.